Stand by. The vacuum tubes are warming up. This is a special live broadcast right here on Georgia Radio.
I am so excited today to talk to Anita Bice for a lot of different reasons. But for one, I worked a while in Macon, Georgia, and you hear stories about the Goatman down in Macon, Georgia. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, either you've been living under a rock as a lifelong resident of the state of Georgia, or you're new here. Go look up right now, open another browser window or however, and look up the Goatman. This is an icon in Georgia history, and Anita Bice, she's a writer, but she grew up, and the Goatman lived in her pasture. I'm so excited to talk to you today, Anita. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
So, what was this like, having an icon of Georgia history live literally in the side pasture, just off
let me
where you grew up?
Start off from where it all started, if that's okay.
I love it. Start at the beginning.
Okay, in 1963, I was 7 years old, and we lived in Bowden Junction, Georgia. There wasn't a red light there, and we did have a post office that my Aunt Bertie and Uncle Lester ran, and a gas station grocery store called Tom's, and Mr. Maxwell's furniture store. So it wasn't a tremendously huge place for the Goatman to stop. I lived with my mama, Leela May, and my daddy, Millard Edward. He said that his mama ran out of names, and that may be true because his brother's name was Paul Bunyan. So
that's just great.
So my mama's mama, Nanny, lived with us, and I was named after my mom, Macy Anita, and I go by Anita. And I'll tell you sometimes about when I was adopted at birth, and I found out after I answered the phone 5 years ago that I had 6 half-siblings, that my birth name was Bragg, and that I'm a third cousin to Rick.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. Amazing.
Wow.
All right, down to the Goatman. One day I got especially lucky when Charles McCartney, our Chess, a real live man, asked my daddy for permission to park in our lower acre, which we called the pasture. I remember being outside with my grandmother. I was playing jacks on the front porch, very happy with my puppy, and she was working in her flower garden. But all of a sudden, we heard this loud, clanging, rattling noise, which you couldn't imagine what in the world was going on. And down the road, the middle of the road, went 30 goats. I counted them, pulling and pushing his wagon. And all of a sudden, it just came into view, and he stopped right in front of our driveway. Well, I panicked. And I heard I'm not the only one that panicked. When he came into Carrollton, Georgia, the kids at the United Methodist Church kindergarten hid under the desk. It was so incredibly loud, which I always think is funny. Well, anyway, we were both terrified. I ran inside my house searching for my mama, and I found her in the kitchen cleaning up. And I practically climbed her to get on top of her into her arms because I was so scared. The Goatman parked outside, and soon there was a knock at our screen door. It was summer, and we didn't have AC, so when the Goatman's loud, raspy voice said, "And about home," it carried through the house, and it was just unreal. I remember my daddy thought it was so funny that I was so scared.
Yeah.
Mama tried to comfort me by saying, "Oh, it's only the Goatman." And I thought, only the Goatman?
Yeah.
So my imagination was just spinning out like crazy. So anyway, my dad went to the door and invited Mr. McCartney inside. You had to see him, though, through my 7-year-old panicked eyes. He hobbled as he came inside. He was very wrinkled and sunbaked, and he was filthy, and he smelled to high heavens. I had never seen a homeless person. Needless to say, the Goatman, who wasn't really homeless in his eyes, but he was a gypsy. Peebo, who was always perfectly dressed and clean, stuck out his hand to shake the Goatman's grimy hand. He welcomed him to our home and said he was always welcome there. Well, I almost died. We walked out to the front yard, and I watched as the Goatman got in his wagon. He shook the reins, and the noise began again, which was incredibly loud. Pots and pans rattling and everything on that wagon. When he got to the pasture, he stopped and immediately went into the woods. He stayed in there for a few minutes, and he came out with limbs and branches, and he stacked them kind of in a crisscross pattern with each other. Then he went to his wagon, and he pulled out an old black tire, and he threw it on top of the wood. He got out a match, and pretty soon there was this terrible black smoke coming up that smelled awful. That's when Chess told us that it was his people drawing fuel. People from all over the community saw it and were coming to see if there was a fire, so it really was. He also said the smoke and the smell kept the mosquitoes away. That really was great to him because he could talk longer and he liked to preach. So on top of his wagon, there was a sign that said, "Prepare to meet thy God." I was standing with my family and watching the Goatman very carefully. He went into his wagon and retrieved his Bible, and he stood on the wagon, on the top of the wagon, and began to preach. I don't remember exactly what the sermon was about because I was too busy paying too close attention to him and watching the people watch him. When he was finished speaking, he got out a cigar box and passed it around, and it was just brimming over with money when it came back. It was his collection box from church. But he stuffed the money in the box, and I watched him as he went in the wagon and put it under his bed. So no telling what I was under that bed. He used the money he got to buy things that he needed to survive, and the goat food is what I heard. My nanny liked to spoil Mr. McCartney, though, by cooking for him. We had lots of fresh vegetables because it was summertime, and she cooked a lot. And she made all those vegetables and 2 fried pork chops for him with, I can't remember if it was homemade cornbread or biscuits, but he loved it. As time went by and I was around Chess more, he was always nice to me, and he was always very kind to his goats. So I started to get less and less afraid of him. But I began to enjoy having him around, too. He was fun. The last morning I was out with Chess by myself. The goats were used to people being around, so they were very friendly. The Goatman pulled out a bottle of goat milk, was ready to feed a kid goat. And I was taking on how cute the little goat was and rubbing on it and just having fun. And he kept holding the goat, but he handed me the bottle and said, "You want to feed her?" And I took the bottle and stuck it in the goat's face. I was 7. I didn't know where to put it. He helped me to get it into her mouth, and she sucked it hard over and over until it was all gone. She was so little and sweet. It made for such an amazing time that I will just never forget.
I had a question for you, Anita.
Okay.
Did he would have slept in this wagon?
He did.
Out there on your property.
With the goats. He slept in our pasture and spent the night. There was a fire down there, and people from all over just came like crazy. We didn't have video games, and TV wasn't that big of a deal, so people came.
I love it. Well, he's such an icon. You know, he eventually passed away in Macon in a nursing home.
Right.
And it was a local celebrity down there, but the area in South Georgia.
I think he was 105.
He was an old man when he died, and he looked like he was 105 probably when he showed up there to your place back then in the 60s.
He definitely did.
Well, you've written a children's book about this, which is just fantastic, and I love it. How did that come about?
Well, it kind of came from memories. I used to jot down my notes and journals, and just one day I decided that he was interesting, and he was just a legend, and I didn't want the children to never know about him. So I wanted them to hear about him. So I wrote a historical fiction book, which most of it's true. Some of it's a little exaggerated to make the story more fun, but that's poetic license, I suppose. The story uses my 5 grandchildren's names as part of the goat, and I dedicated it to them because they're my goats. And also, that's part, wait a minute. Also, the part about his crippled arm is made up in the story because it was a great story about when he was lumberjacking and the tree fell on him and he ended up in a coffin right before they put him away. He woke up. So you'll have to read the book to find out exactly what happens.
Well, it is available at your website, by the way, AnitaBice.com.
Yeah.
You worked as an educator. You were a Georgia girl, I got to say, through and through. University of Georgia, where you graduated from. But
yes,
you became a principal and
I did.
created curriculum for kids. So a book like this, which really does dive into the imagination, there's some benefits there, some real benefits for kids opening up that window, isn't there?
Definitely. To go back and study all these things would just read about them, to get them into their minds, open such imagination and lets them travel anywhere they need to be.
I think that's wonderful. Well, it's a great book, and I've loved seeing it and meeting you. Your background in education is wonderful, and I love that you bring that forward in this book. But I really think the personal touch with you and Chess McCartney early on is what, in my opinion, makes this book so much fun. And I asked you before you came on if you had a picture of you and Chess McCartney.
I so wish I did.
Oh.
I do have a picture in the back of the book that my nanny took in 1963 when he was parked in our pasture.
Isn't that great? Well, that's the one that I'm going to look forward to seeing then in the back. I got to go back
and
there.
I do have a picture of me with my kids where we went to see him at an art gallery in Alabama. And I don't remember the year. It may be in the book. I figured it out. But it was when I was pregnant with one of my kids. But we had that picture in the back of the book.
And you must have reintroduced yourself and said, "I'm the 7-year-old girl that."
I did. He just nodded his head, and we got him to sign our picture, and he did that with his thumbprint.
Golly. Well, what an amazing guy. And, of course, everybody knows the Goatman down in South Georgia. And,
absolutely.
And really all over the country.
Deal.
50 states that he traveled to. The lower 48, I should say.
Everywhere except a couple of states. He couldn't get all the way to Hawaii. He said the goats couldn't swim that far, and if they did, they'd just eat the hula skirts off the women.
That's right. He's true Chess McCartney style. What a folk hero of Georgia and so many other places. But he was a guy that was just completely unafraid, and I think that is what resonates with me. I love the story about him walking to California there late in life. To go off and marry the love of his life, the actress whose name at this you would have thought I would have written a note down.
I'm not familiar with that story.
Yeah, well, it's a great story, but he who knows if he truly believed that he was going to walk out there and marry this Hollywood starlet. But the point is he did it, and he always had a great story, which just leads to the lovability of this guy. That's not even a word, but I think we're going to make it one for the Goatman today. But I thought that your story just really brings it all to heart, and it's with such a personal touch. You got to go read it. Tell folks how they can get it.
Well, you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble if you want to get it, or you can go to AnitaBice.com and order it in my Etsy shop, and I'll sign it and mail it to you.
And we're going to make that available in the show story right here on Georgia Radio. We'll quick link to AnitaBice.com. Anita, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, we'll have you back. And, of course, we are celebrating local Georgia authors here on Georgia Radio. We got a whole bunch of them coming up. We've heard from several already, but Anita, thank you for coming on the show. Just wonderful to
Thank
meet
you
you.
so much.
And I look forward to talking to you real soon. We'll be right back with more great music right after this.
Country, that's what I grew up listening to.
Georgia Radio. We love you more than peanuts and peaches. So glad you're here.